The sixth Democratic debate featured just 7 candidates: Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Pete Buttigieg, Andrew Yang, Amy Klobuchar, and Tom Steyer. The event was hosted by PBS and Politico in Los Angeles and was the last debate of 2019 for the Democratic presidential primary contest. As I had predicted in my predictions video, the debate featured an extended conversation about the impeachment of President Donald Trump, and numerous candidates unloaded on Mayor Pete in regards to his big money fundraising. But there were also plenty of surprises. Amy Klobuchar showed a new willingness to attack her fellow moderates, Bernie Sanders avoided taking much heat from lower polling candidates, and Andrew Yang did not end up getting more talking time than he normally does. Once again, he had less time than any other candidate on stage. While I will follow up soon with a more extended breakdown of the debate, in this video I'm going to try to be relatively brief and focus in on distinguishing the winners from the losers. So who can be expected to gain new ground after this debate, who failed to make an impact, and who lost? Let's begin with the lowest polling candidate in the December debate, Tom Steyer. As with other low polling candidates, the standard to achieve a real victory in a Democratic debate for Steyer is high. Without serious upward momentum or strong standing in the polls, low polling candidates need to make a serious impact in the debates to propel themselves into serious consideration for the nomination. In general, Steyer seemed to perform better than usual in this debate. He seemed more comfortable on stage and delivered reasonably strong arguments in favor of impeachment and about Trump's divisiveness.
This president is not against immigration, he's against immigration by non-white people. The court that counts here is the court of public opinion.
He faltered in arguing once again that he is the only candidate on stage to consider climate change the #1 issue, a repeat from the 5th Democratic debate. He also attempted to claim the mantle of being a longtime supporter of a wealth tax, having done so for a year, which would mean that he first adopted the idea 21 years after Sanders published a book claiming that he was in support of the policy. All in all, Steyer showed improvement, but good for Steyer isn't good. He failed to effectively articulate or demonstrate why he, above the far more popular choices on stage, should be the nominee. As a result, it was absolutely a loss for him.
Get rid of this guy, or we'll get rid of you.
Andrew Yang, who, as I mentioned in the intro, got less time to speak than any other candidate on stage, made good use of that time.
We go to employers and say, hey, this special needs person can be a contributor in your workplace, which may be correct, but that's not the point. We have to stop confusing economic value and human value. We have to be able to say to our kids and Kyle that you have intrinsic value because you're an American and you're a human being.
He argued that nuclear power should not be ignored as an alternative energy source if we're talking about the safer alternative of thorium-based nuclear power. He argued that Trump is not the cause of all our troubles and that impeachment will not stop Trump from being the nominee. And speaking about racial justice, he explained how economic power translates into political power.
And the question is, why am I the lone candidate of color on this stage? Fewer than 5% of Americans donate to political campaigns. You know what you need to donate to political campaigns? Disposable income.
Yang probably had a better performance in the 5th Democratic debate than in this one, and failed then to propel himself into top-tier status in the polls. At the same time, his performance was virtually flawless. I have to count this as a win, but with an asterisk. I don't see this creating a surge in his poll numbers. Joe Biden remains the frontrunner in this race when it comes to the polling and has once again managed to escape a debate without much in the way of fire from the other candidates. He did of course manage to do a little damage to himself, I think, with some rather bizarre moments.
A little kid who says, I can't talk. What do I do? You're not the only one that does selfies, Senator. I've done thousands of them.
If elected, you would turn 82 at the end of your first term. You'd be the oldest president in American history.
Are like you Winston willing? Churchill.
American history.
Oh, American history.
Yes. Are you?
I was joking. That was a joke.
Okay.
But Biden overall presented himself better than he has in past debates. He appeared strong and confident on stage, with effective speeches that probably compensated for his weaker moments.
The people who come here have determination, resilience. They are ready to stand up and work like the devil. The idea that we are going to walk away and not provide every opportunity for them is not only stupid and immoral, but it's bad for America. They are the future of America, and we should invest in them. Everybody will benefit from it, every single American, and you should get used to it. This is a nation of immigrants. That's who we are. That's why we're who we are. That's what makes us different, and we should invest in them.
Were Biden's campaign in total freefall, or were he a smaller candidate fighting to gain support, this performance would not have done it for him. But as the frontrunner, it was enough to count as a win. Even though he escaped undamaged, that doesn't mean he was totally conflict-free. Biden did spar with Bernie a couple of times with an extended debate over healthcare, but both candidates presented essentially the same arguments they've put forward in the past. And I don't expect either to have left the debate with any harm done to their campaigns as a result. Bernie Sanders entered this debate in extremely strong shape, surging nationally, in Iowa, and in New Hampshire. At this point in the race, Sanders appears to be the most viable alternative to Biden, so even a mediocre performance to maintain his momentum would likely be sufficient to count him as a winner of this debate. And yet, Sanders delivered much more than that. He clearly distinguished his Iraq vote from that of Biden's, always a strong point to include. He laid out the specific benefits recipients of a Medicare for All system would receive. He pointed out how unlike Biden and Buttigieg, who have each received contributions from dozens of billionaires, Bernie himself has received 0 donations from the billionaire class, and has run a clean grassroots campaign. He also made a strong argument in favor of his own electability, arguing that his progressive message would increase voter turnout. He also powerfully laid out what that progressive vision is.
The vision that we need to bring forth is to create a government and a nation based on love and compassion, not greed and hatred. We need a vision which says that in our great country, all of our people should be able to earn a decent standard of living, have health care, have the ability to send their kids to college regardless of their income. So we need a new vision which brings our people together around an agenda that works for all, not the Trump vision of dividing us up to benefit the billionaire class. That's my vision.
Sanders' rhetoric on the environment and climate change was likewise effective.
What the scientists are telling us is they have underestimated the threat and severity of climate change. You're talking about the Paris Agreement, that's fine. Ain't enough. We have got to, and I've introduced legislation to do this, declare a national emergency. The United States has got to lead the world. And maybe, just maybe, instead of spending $1.8 trillion a year globally on weapons of destruction, maybe an American president, i.e. Bernie Sanders, can lead the world. Instead of spending money to kill each other, maybe we pool our resources and fight our common enemy, which is climate change.
Thank you, Senator Sanders.
A candidate already in strong standing, surging in the polls, who is out competing his rivals by any measure of fundraising, Sanders could have squeaked by in this debate fairly easily, but his especially strong speeches put him over the top. Not just a winner, but probably the winner of this debate. A strong showing from Sanders is perhaps not all that surprising, but the recurrently shaky Amy Klobuchar delivered a far more commanding performance than I had expected. She came to the debate prepared with some sharp lines.
You want to cross a river over some troubled waters, you build a bridge, you don't blow one up. James Madison, and by the way, I think he's a pretty good size for a president. He was 5'4". If the president claims that he is so innocent, then why doesn't he have all the president's men testify? Richard Nixon had his top people testify. As Martin Luther King says, what good is it to integrate a lunch counter if you can't afford a hamburger?
But more importantly, Klobuchar finally decided to drop the hammer on a fellow moderate, which in my view has been for some time now a requirement for any chance of her moving up in the polls. More than that, in the last debate, I was disappointed to see Klobuchar fail to take on Pete Buttigieg over the issue of experience, even when teed up to do so by the moderators. This time around, and perhaps the most exciting moment in the debate, she had a heated exchange with Mayor Pete over not just his experience, but also his electability. That conflict ended with Klobuchar pointing out,
Mayor, if If you had won in Indiana, that would be one thing. You tried and you lost by 20 points.
But let's talk about how we win.
Excuse me.
This was a reference to his run for state treasurer of Indiana, where he actually lost by a devastating 25 points. Not only did Klobuchar deal real damage to Buttigieg, thus setting the stage for herself to scoop up some of his disillusioned supporters, she also demonstrated serious sparring chops, making the prospect of a Klobuchar-Trump debate seem a little less hopeless for Democrats. In this debate, Klobuchar went beyond good for Klobuchar. She had a genuinely strong performance. While I don't expect this will put her into top-tier contention in the polls, I do expect to see her make some gains, and for Buttigieg to come out of this suffering.
On issue after issue, we've got to break out of the Washington mindset that measures the bigness of an idea by how many trillions of dollars it adds to the budget, or the boldness of an idea by how many fellow Americans it can antagonize.
Aside from Klobuchar's attacks on his experience and electability, Buttigieg also may have dealt some damage to himself by relying a little too heavily on over-rehearsed stump speeches. I certainly don't mind it when candidates come to the stage prepared, but when you're repeating yourself over and over again in debates, it's not a good look. Just off the top of my head, Pete seemed to repeat the line about China using technology for the perfection of dictatorship. On issue after issue, we need to break out of the Washington mindset, saying of his experience, it may not be the same as yours, but it counts. It counts. And of course, I know what goes on in my city may seem small. Pete Buttigieg came into the Democratic debate in rather rough shape, plummeting in the polls and facing new heat over his connections with big money donors and how he conducts his fundraising. Indeed, he took heat from a number of candidates on these issues and more.
If we were to put 100 democracy dollars into the hands of every American voter, instead of 5% contributing, you'd see that rate skyrocket to 50 or 60%, and you'd have many, many more women who would run for office because they don't have to go shake the money tree in the wine cave.
I know everybody is worried about this, but for instance, I would call on Mayor Buttigieg to prioritize this higher because the people in his generation understand that this is a crisis that we have to go on right now.
I came here to make a case for progress, and I have never even been to a wine cave. I've been to the Wind Cave in South Dakota, which I suggest you go to.
Now, there's a real competition going on up here. My good friend Joe, and he is a good friend, he's received contributions from 44 billionaires. Pete, on the other hand, is trailing. Pete, you only got 39 billionaires contributing. So, Pete, we look forward to you. I know you're an energetic guy and a competitive guy to see if you can take on Joe on that issue.
The mayor just recently had a fundraiser that was held in a wine cave full of crystals and served $900 a bottle wine. Think about who comes to that. He had promised that every fundraiser he would do would be open door, but this one was closed door.
The most pronounced attack against Buttigieg on the fundraising issue came from Elizabeth Warren, who described his recent Crystal Wine Cave fundraiser and connected this back to how she does not take money for political favors.
I do not sell access to my time. I don't do call time with millionaires and billionaires.
Sorry, as of when, Senator?
I don't meet behind closed doors with big dollar donors.
Pete had essentially a three-pronged defense. Warren is 100 times more wealthy than he is, which is kind of irrelevant on its own. Warren used to raise money in the same way and is currently benefiting from that, which damages Warren but does not do anything to help him. And the classic Hillary Clinton argument, sure, rich people give me money, but that doesn't corrupt me. This last argument, I think, has been roundly rejected by Americans. It's why many candidates in this race decided to reject PAC money, not just Bernie Sanders. By and large, I believe most people agree that when rich people and corporations give money to candidates, they do so expecting some return on investment. And that even if and when a wealthy donor does not expect anything in return, a campaign finance system that makes politicians constantly rely on and socialize with wealthy donors creates a disconnect between average people and their leaders in Washington. Suffering attacks from Klobuchar, Warren, and several others, Buttigieg left this debate badly damaged, a serious loss in my view.
Senator Warren, you would be the oldest president ever inaugurated. I'd like you to weigh in as well.
I'd also be the youngest woman ever inaugurated.
But just because Elizabeth Warren landed some blows in her battle with Buttigieg does not mean she escaped the match unscathed. Mayor Pete was absolutely correct to point out that she was currently benefiting from money raised in the very same ethically dubious manner in which he raises money now. She in fact did transfer over $10 million to her presidential campaign from her 2018 Senate run, and some of that cash was raised from big money donors. How much, it's actually impossible to tell.
If we don't attack the corruption first, if we don't attack the corruption head on, then we're not going to be able to make the changes we need to make on climate, on gun safety, on drug pricing, on all of the big problems that face us.
Thank you.
We need a Washington that doesn't just work for the rich and the powerful. We need one that works for our families.
While overall Warren's performance was not especially poor, she wasn't able to deliver anything particularly special, which might make Pete's attack on her financial shenanigans the most memorable thing about Warren's performance to come out of this debate. She might survive that with no issue, were her positioning in the polls particularly strong. But while she remains the relative frontrunner in this race, averaging in third place nationally, she has continued to plummet in the polls since early October. A below average performance was certainly less than she needed to steer her campaign onto a path to victory. I don't anticipate a total collapse for her campaign coming out of the 6th Democratic debate, but she's most likely to continue seeing slippage as a result of her performance. I count this debate as a loss for Elizabeth Warren. So for the December debate, I see Bernie Sanders as the biggest winner of the night. Biden, Yang, and Klobuchar delivered winning performances as well. Warren, Steyer, and especially Buttigieg appeared to be the biggest losers. Let me know in the comments down below your thoughts about the debate. Who do you think won? And who lost?